All right. Well, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it. Look forward to sharing this conversation with you. My intention is that it becomes a conversation. I have been known to talk a lot, so if there's questions, interrupt me. I'm also fine with ADHD or ADD rabbit holes or rabbit trails. Rabbit holes? Right? When you go down a rabbit trail? Yeah. No, that's YouTube late at night. Rabbit trail is when you...
I think there's a trail.
Same thing? I'm good with... I'm good with that. Honestly, I hate slides because they're linear, and I'm a little more random. I like to fill my head with knowledge and ideas and information, and then just pull them out when I feel like we need them. So I'm going to look from time to time at my notes to kind of see which slide was next, although I can look up there as well. So thanks for being here. My name is Joel Wetztsein. I am a son of a missionary man. Was born in Brazil, lived in Panama, went to Concordia Irvine, class of 91. I'm looking for some connection points. If any of this is true of you, seminary for a couple of years. Dropout? Stand alone.
My daughter's a DPM from Irvine.
Okay, very good. Very good. I've been married 25 years, got 3 kids. My oldest one already got her first job. My middle son, or my son, is working on being a pilot. My youngest daughter struggles with dyslexia, and we're working hard to combat that in our school district. These are some things about my people, and some stuff about me. And all of us have stuff about us. And I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you so you knew who I was. I'm a full-time worship director. I worked at Cross Point Katy back in the beginning, Salem Tomball for a little while, Milwaukee, Brookfield Lutheran with this guy, actually, with Mark for 5 years, and now I'm at the multi-site worship director in Minneapolis at Woodbury Lutheran Church. And I'm one of these music director guys who actually finds a lot of I don't know if it's joy or... I enjoy spreadsheets. Comfort. I enjoy, comfort. Budgets, spreadsheets, timelines, calendars, plans, bullet lists, things to stay organized. There's a lot going on in a lot of our churches. And I leverage a lot of those for the things that I have to do with my role, but I'm also very interested in leveraging information and data for effective ministry as well. It is not my current role to include stuff like that directly. I do a side hustle to teach people and train people about that and do database migrations on the side. I'm going to try to talk today about data and leveraging it for ministry in some pretty general principles. I'm going to tell you all my screenshots are from Planning Center that has a full integrated suite of registrations, check-ins, service planning, giving, small group management, calendaring, app, groups, small groups, all that stuff. So if you use Planning Center, you'll recognize the screenshots, and some of them are a little old because they are constantly changing. If you don't use Planning Center and you're interested in it, I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. This session is about your people. I have a couple of phrases. I like to say stuff twice with different emphasis as I say them, just to kind of at times draw out a different point. When it comes to data, I believe that the quality of data and the quantity of data, if both aren't, well, both are important factors. If you've got a lot of data and it's all inaccurate, then it's really not very useful. And if you have a little accurate data, it's only as useful as the quantity of data that you have. So to be able to leverage good data, to have a lot of good data is really helpful. What I find when I just work with different churches, and even sometimes in my own experiences, when a database is either difficult to use or not intuitive, everybody avoids it, and then the accurate data goes to inaccurate data. I worked at a church, I think, Mark, you might have been at the same one, where there was one lady who had one computer who had one access to the only information, and none of us could ever get to it, and so it became a security fireproof, let's see, it was like a security fireproof lockbox in a safe in the basement, and like no one was allowed to touch it, which was, I mean, it was accurate. Bonnie was, I mean, she was accurate, and there was a lot of it. But if you can't access it, then it really doesn't matter either. So access to high quality, high quantity of data is I think the best way to be able to then leverage that. You know, out in the world there today, there's a lot of talk about big data. Companies out there buy it. Companies out there sell it. Pretty much everything we do is used to sell to us. I think I've had a conversation in my room. I may have whispered, you know, like dongle and searching for something, and like suddenly the ads start appearing on my computer because there's data. I mean, that may be exaggerating, but there's data that's constantly being traded back and forth to better. I mean, the intention is to sell to us, but a lot of times it ends up serving us as well. Because like if you're going on vacation searches, you know, flights and advertisements and stuff start popping up, and someone may or may not win my money, but it gives me ideas as I work along. So everybody experienced something like that before? The fireproof lockbox security, you know, like inaccessible, high quality, high quantity data being useless means we rely on like our gut impressions at times, or paper, or spreadsheets that are disjointed and not shared with someone else. I had my own address list of all my phone numbers and information about people. You've probably worked with your own spreadsheets and stuff that don't talk to anything else. There's things like Constant Contact and MailChimp that get uploaded information one time, and then it's like never heard from again, and people start unsubscribing. The list gets smaller and smaller. Your communication becomes more and more ineffective. Does any of that sound familiar? What other data tragedies have you experienced, or anything like that? Maybe those aren't tragedies, but anybody, something like, yeah.
People move or change their email address, but you have no idea, so you just keep sending them stuff or contacting them that way, but you're not contacting them.
Or someone the next office over knew about it and didn't bother to enter it with Bonnie with the safety deposit box database, right? Like classic case, right? Or there's Stewardship Sunday, and you say, you know, stewardship is more than just your money. It's about your time and your talents and resources. Fill out this form, and we're going to throw it away and never call you again. Has that ever happened to you? I think that's a shame. When someone volunteers or offers to be part of serving in your community and you don't follow up, you're actually missing out on celebrating a step of discipleship. To serve like Jesus served. And if we want to be more like Jesus, perhaps modeling more of his behaviors is a thing that should be noticed, celebrated, that people should be invited to it, right? So I'm going to try to, I'm going to try to talk about stuff like that makes it more useful, or that your data becomes more useful. The other thing I want to do is to help you be curious about what let me get this right. I want you to be curious about what you're seeing and what it means as you look at your data. Be curious about what you see, and be curious about how you got there and where you'll go with your data. And if none of that even makes sense to you, it's probably because you live in that world where you don't really have access to good data in a way that feels intuitive. I am, and James and I work together. Everybody say hi to James back there. Hi, James. James is an alcoholic, so we just, that's not true. That's not true. Strike that. Hi, James. I can get wound up. I'm pretty emotional. But I still like fact-based decisions. And I try to, even in the midst of a flurry of activity or something. And the reason I mentioned James, he's like steady as can be, and he is not available for hire as a technical director who kills it. Okay, shout out to James. But to be able to do fact-based decisions rather than, gut, and not that your gut impression or your hunches don't matter, but to be able to make fact-based decisions, I think are important. Here's that quality and quantity of data. I've already talked about this session. Okay, so look at this. Statistics. 86% of statistics are made up on the spot, and only about 14% of them are real. Okay? And I'll say that 2/3 of you already knew that, and there were 1/3 of you who didn't. Right? So that leads me to this thing called hyperboles. And that might have been one of them, right? Where I'm just making stuff up because I'm trying to make a point. And it happens in church committee meetings. I've been in those boardrooms in the basement in Milwaukee where I didn't have a vote. It drives me nuts. Remember that? Yeah. So in a, like, everybody know what a hyperbole is? It's an exaggeration. I used to think it was one of those curves in math class. What is that called? Yeah. I'd like to buy a vowel. Actually, I want to go back real quick because one of the fact-based decisions. I wasn't going too far. Whatever. Fact-based decision might be like what's growing, what's not growing. What's working, what's not working. Giving is up, giving is down. And what are you going to do about that? When you can view hard data, then you're able to make decisions about that. I could have just skipped that. Hyperboles. What are some hyperboles that you've maybe heard at your church? Exaggerations. Perhaps even leverage to make a point, or might even be agenda-driven.
Attendance.
Okay. Like what?
It's always a little higher than it actually is.
Always a little higher than it actually is, especially at conferences. Yeah, Did you know the mega church conference is now the large church conference? They keep lowering the numbers.
It's actually the large and complicated church.
The large and complicated church conference. Other hyperboles, exaggerations.
Elders never do enough,
Elders never do enough.
which isn't true.
Not necessarily true.
Not, but some people that aren't really giving of their time are very involved or don't have the communication of what's, who don't want to have the communication because it makes them become involved in the church.
Yeah.
That'll be their complaint.
Okay.
So it's a
I've been told by so many people this is the way we should do it, and it's probably just one or two people.
Oh, lots of people. Oh, name names. Well, I can't. I'm like, well then.
yeah,
Anybody ever heard if they don't put their name on the note, you put it in the file in the basket in the corner? So I've got some like no one even attends that service. Really? Like no one? I mean, there's at least the pastor and the slide guy in the back. That's two people. It may be low, so that's a hyperbole. Here's another one. There were 500 kids at VBS. I mean, it looked like 500 kids.
We added all the days together.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Collectively across 5 days in 3 campuses or whatever, yeah. We never have any guests at that service. We always have guests at that service. That service has more guests than the other service. Let's see. Or the opposite. There were only like 30 kids at VBS. Well, maybe there were 50. And maybe 20 doesn't make a difference, but maybe it does. And I'm going to say maybe a lot because that's that curious sort of thing. Like, what are you going to do? And do the differences like that matter? And maybe they do and maybe they don't. But if you don't have data, then it's always just going to be based on hunches. Here's another one. We had over 100 baptisms, in the last 6 years. That was the biggest Christmas Eve we ever had. It's still the same people attending the Saturday night service. We never got anyone from the community to come to VBS. They're all members. 80% of the budget comes from the early service. There's 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. Like that's actually could be crippling data to your mindset. Could cause you to give up. Might cause you to make wrong decisions. Any other examples? Hearing some of those. Any other examples? I've heard some of these in meetings. Some of them I'm just making up to make a point.
The old Lutheran one, we've never done it that way before.
And maybe you actually have.
Or we don't do it.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, we don't do that.
Nobody will volunteer for that? Okay. And then if you don't have a way of tracking and remembering who did volunteer, maybe they'll never volunteer again.
Or you don't. It's not an organized event, so they won't come back because you didn't honor their.
That could be true as well, yeah. You said something, sir?
I says, we don't do it that way.
Okay, we don't do it that way. And if there's a record of it that you did, then yeah. It's not even just about being right. It's about being informed, empowered with truth. Every talk that I've been to, someone has a quote in from the Bible, and so I'm talking about data, so I just figured I should bring this up. The first household ID is in Genesis 4. I'm going to call it the Addams family just for fun, because it's Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. They were grouped together in a family. That's in Genesis 4, right? Like very early on in the Bible, someone decided, God, to build a family unit. Here's another one, the database drop-down menu. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers. I mean, so someone in Ephesians, Paul, decided they should start categorizing the types of leaders there were. And, I thought that was kind of cool. And a Martin Luther quote. Because every talk I've been to, I added this last night. Oh, it still says add Martin Luther quote. It's my Martin Luther quote.
I stand by that. I would like to think of their probably putting
Trying to hide it.
for our, it's going in my bio.
But there are three conversions. The conversion of the heart, mind, and purse. I'm not exactly sure how you would track this, but there would probably be outward evidence of both of these that you could find in whether or not they've gone through rites and sacraments like faith, communion, baptism, I said faith, confirmation, things like that. And then maybe when you start giving that one time because you love that song or that sermon and it was cash and anonymous, but you couldn't track that yet. But then they stuck it in an envelope with a number and they never heard from anybody when they did that for the first time, or they changed from doing it once to doing it more often, to scheduled automatically, digitally, right? Okay, I'm going to start all over again. Actually, guys, no, you are, tell me your name. Ruth Woltman. Okay, very good, very good. You're not, I'm going to actually turn this off for a second. I'm just kidding. We actually just finished confession. And we had a couple of doozies. Every time someone's late to any meeting I lead, I do the exact same joke. And I always say something like, wow, I really appreciate your vulnerability with us. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple things, and I want you now to kind of start to spark that curiosity. The question is, what do you see? And if you need to stand up and get a little closer, or if you have a question about it, but just start shouting it out here. You can't see? Sit closer. Lutherans! Somebody move forward.
A lot of young people.
Okay. A lot of young people. Here's 0 to 3, male, female. So, male, female. Look at, wow. This particular church, 1,150 perhaps, and the 4 to 11. 12 to 18-year-olds, and kind of declining, These are the parents who are very busy procreating. Or maybe these are the...
Yeah.
Right? So look, if you look at data and you look at just one tiny piece of it, but you don't look at how it all interacts together, you're missing out on part of it. I want to spark that curiosity. A lot of VBS registrants.
Young congregation.
Could be a young congregation. What else? And now listen, I talked about fact-based decision making, but when you're thinking about curiosity, to ask questions like that, he said, so maybe a lot of VBS registration. So if that were the case, and this is all you can tell from here, But there's some systems where you could say, give me the list of 4 to 11-year-olds who attended VBS
Right.
that one time, right? Okay. But you could guess, perhaps, that, yeah, there's a lot of people who come to VBS and a lot of people involved in the program because maybe this outweighs the number of parents because this isn't a Catholic church. This is a Lutheran one. It's not Mormon. Okay, sorry. Strike that. All right, look at this. Same church. Blue is visitor. I can't click on that. And by the way, this isn't visitors on one Sunday. This is visitors as long as this church has been tracking.
So that makes me wonder whether that's a category that's like other, that maybe isn't actually visitor. That seems crazy.
Well, okay, so there's visitor. There's green, that's active member. Define active. That should make you curious. In fact, maybe it should make you curious about your own church. Stop looking at this for a second. How do we define our statuses at our church? Based on what? And how do you know? Is it real? Is it not? Does it matter? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. There I go again, okay? Yeah.
It's gotta change as they become transferred from one to the
Like,
other.
what kind of visitor? Are they local or are they from out of town?
Okay. All right, so we got lots of visitors, a few active members. Actually, this is active members. These are regular attenders. How often is regular? Don't let words slip by you. I want to spark curiosity.
Well, and how is baptized?
Drill down and force the answer. Go ahead.
I said, why is baptized separate from regular?
Well, and baptized and not baptized are separate, so if you're parts of a whole, that doesn't include anybody else.
Okay.
But what's the
Exactly, right? Now, in our tradition, where would a brand new baby, day 2, not yet baptized, would be not baptized? So if you track who's not baptized, what's the next thing you can do with them, perhaps? Baptize them. Okay, and then they move over to here, right? And then in our tradition, programmatically, faith development-wise, yeah, you might go over here. Okay. Now, when do you become a member in this case? Depends on your church, right? Do you have to be 18 to be a voting member before you're a member? Do you just have to have been baptized to be a member? So look, when you combine baptized and confirmed with active members, maybe that's a little different. So why would you split it up? And track it differently, and even show you a dial so you can look at it every day when you go to work. That was the question. Why would you, why might you do that?
So you can act on it.
James, stop answering all the questions.
No one's talking.
I know, but you got to wait a second, make it really uncomfortable. Look directly at someone and make them answer, All right, here's another one. No, I'm sorry, this is the same one, but the same view. So now, it's interesting, when you look at the demographics along with, oh wait, this is not the same one, I'm sorry. Another church.
The left one is the same, but the right one's.
Yeah, that is the same. Did I mix and match my... No, that's one screenshot. You know what? In my copying and pasting, this probably belongs to another church. It actually doesn't matter. The point is making you curious. It really doesn't. I mean, it does actually at that church, but for the sake of this, we have 10,000 people. You're on the wrong subscription. But for the sake of curiosity, again, okay, so we already talked about this. Here's another one. Guest is the light blue. We have covenant members. Covenant, ooh. I mean, the definition at this church matters. What else do you see here?
Unassigned.
Okay. Which means they don't,
Assign them.
or they don't know, right? And by keeping it out there in front of them, they know that maybe there's work to be done. I see no participants, I don't think, or it's such a small sliver it doesn't show up on the graph. So again, just trying to spark some curiosity. Here's another one. That's not another one. It was late when I was finishing these. Here, this is the one I want to show. Oh, I know what I was going to do. So look at this. And now look at this. Boom, 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 boom. This is not a time warp. These are two different places. These people did not grow up. This is a different church. So what do you see here? Okay. Wait, let's talk about that a little bit. And what urgency, I'll say, should this create for us?
It's an older congregation.
Okay, older congregation. Kind of evenly split. Maybe intermarried. I'm just kidding. Strike that too. It almost looks...
It could be the same congregation, a couple decades apart.
Yeah, so this was not a time warp, but that, I mean, it almost kind of looks like it could be.
There's churches in the 60s and one now.
Okay.
Makes you wonder why there's not more kids. There's 26 to 35. This is almost the same amount as the other one.
Yeah, now, scale-wise, I will point this out. This is 300 on this one. This is 600 on that. So it is scaled to that church. That could be very misleading. Here's the other thing I've heard before when people look at this. There's one column for 65 plus, so there could be 90-year-olds in there. They are older than 65 plus. What I see when I look at this is like toddlers, nursery ministry, daycare sort of stuff. This is elementary school, Sunday school. This is youth ministry, young adults, families with small children, boomers, perhaps, right? And so that could be, that could drive staffing. Should drive staffing? Staffing for the way it is now, or staffing the way you want it to be? Just trying to spark curiosity to look at your data about your people to help you make fact-based decision, strategic type things. Let me silence. That's my stockbroker, I think. I don't have a stockbroker. I don't know where my phone is right now. Oh, it's right here. That's not even my phone. I'm silenced. Someone silence your phone. Is it my computer?
We're seeing all your texts.
Are you really? All right, so now I'm going to fly through a bunch of different screenshots, okay? Not fly. We can talk about them, but same program, different church. Cornerstone. Sorry, excuse me. All right, this is attendance in 2018 across the year in Sunday morning check-ins. This is their kids. These are volunteers. The yellow is volunteers. That's 180, just to give you a scale, okay? So, gosh, this is Christmas, or New Year's. Apparently no church on New Year's, or no Sunday school on New Year's, because no one shows up, right? Or the families do, but the kids don't? No, they do. But we cancel children's ministry on that Sunday for some reason, because it's hard to get volunteers. Try getting a tech team and a band on New Year's Eve day, right? New Year's Day. New Year's Day. Brutal. I hate that excuse, children's ministers. You know what's hard to do? Get volunteers on Good Friday night at 11 o'clock to do a stage change for Easter Sunday morning at 4 a.m. I'm not picking on you directly, anybody, and I'm a little bitter about it.
Children's minister canceled it because our families worship together.
Oh, very good, very good. Very good. Here's another snapshot of data. February 18th, there were 138 people. 124 of them were regular. 14 volunteers. How does that ratio sound? 10 to 1-ish. It's not too bad. Fact-based decision making and observations make you curious about this. I wonder if we should be getting more volunteers. Well, if you never look at the ratio directly and are curious about that, you might never know. This is up 29% from last week.
Which
Just the total number. In this screenshot, this is 29%. Gosh, this might be one volunteer for the nursery with no kids that are showing up. Could be what I've seen it where there's maybe the older traditional service, perhaps, where we provide daycare and no one shows up. So then at my church, we eventually cancel it for a while because no one shows up, and I'm like, which came first? Maybe they don't show up because you don't provide some of the services. Who knows? Make you curious about it. Bunch of people come at 9:15, fewer people at 10:45. I'm not exactly sure what that means in this case, but it can tell you something. And when this is your context, you might know a little bit more. Here's giving. Here's a snapshot of giving across 2017. Where's Easter? There. Okay. Where's end of year giving? This is a $2 million budget at this church. I showed you one of these already. This is another. Oh, this is from BLC, a screenshot way back when. There's Chalo. Lots of kids. That's pretty nice balance there. Let's move along here. Here's another one from a giving platform. Now this is a little distorted in this particular case because when you do a conversion, when you do a conversion from one giving system to another giving system, the first time they give, they are a new donor because it hasn't been tracked before in that sense. 40 recurring donors out of 964. What kind of work might there be to do in that case? Maybe invite people into regular giving. Okay, well, maybe they give regularly. Maybe invite them into regular planned giving, ACH. But what if you never invite them to do so because you never bothered to look at your data all at once to compare them? Because 40 sounds like a lot until you see it next to 964. Be curious and critical, and not like furrowed brow critical, but analytical when you look at data. In this particular case, 12,745 donations in this year. And look at this 40 recurring, pretty small number on ACH and credit card, probably connected. Sometimes you have to make some assumptions, but sometimes those are pretty, you're not, this particular system wouldn't measure a recurring envelope of a check. This is measuring electronically. Lots of cash, way more checks. These could be regular givers. There's a guy at a church of mine in my past who would say that they would gather at their table and pray every Saturday night before writing their check for Sunday morning. That's the way he was raised. That's what he saw his parents do, and that's what they do. Don't discount regular checking account givers in the envelope. But just curious about your data, right? I love a view like this. This is double-clicking into a check-in type of a view. Blanked out the person for their privacy. Hopefully I did that everywhere, yeah. I love this view here. Imagine being able to look over the last 12 months and see if someone's flatlined in their participation and engagement at your church. Where's summer vacation? Right in the middle. Excuse it? Maybe. Understand it? Yeah. Where's back to school? Maybe right in here somewhere? Or back from vacation. And then back to school, it gets busy. Isn't that interesting?
Especially if they have a lot of young families.
Well, this is one person. I'm sorry.
Oh,
This is
okay.
one person. This is drilling into, so you go from attendance to someone's individual participation, perhaps before you have a conversation with them. Because you can. Because it's accessible, high-quality data. That's intuitive when you look at it. Anybody got this? Who's using Planning Center People? I'm going to ask right now. 1, 2, 3, 4 of you. Okay, great. Great.
So is this something where you could, in Planning Center specifically, you can set up a list that's like, we haven't seen them they haven't been active on Planning Center in 6 months, so then they go into a workflow that's like, hey, somebody should probably contact them. Is that an appropriate
Absolutely.
use of that? Okay.
I would say if you're using Planning Center people and you're not using stuff like that, there's a lot of opportunity for you. I'm going to talk about some of these coming up here. Here's yeah, huh? This is a zoomed in view that was part of that other financial thing, so you could just kind of see a little bit more. Oh, no, this is the average. I'm sorry, I clicked from the number. This is the average gift. So the average gift on ACH is about $200. The average credit card gift, because we're financing our offering, is about $150. The average cash gift, I never carry cash. Never.
Would that be the same frequency for each category?
This is an average over the course of a year of these 12,745 donations. So the average cash donation that comes in an envelope that is named, so it's trackable, in this case is about that much. So it's interesting, look at this. The one might assume, well, this is going to be scheduled regular giving. That by nature, that's ACH. Very rarely that I've ever seen do you trigger a one-time ACH thing. Most people, as soon as you set this up, you might go from tipping, because it was a great sermon. No, that would be the anonymous one that's not even showing up here. This would be you have an envelope, which means you're a member, which means you like the song or the sermon, or you're a regular young giver, perhaps, maybe newer in faith. I'm not going to trust you yet with direct access to my money. Martin Luther, the last thing to convert is the purse. Be curious about your data, and this can tell you stuff about your people. Ministry metrics, what could you be counting? We kind of already looked about that. Why keep track? Okay.
See the effectiveness of your program,
Oh, okay. Based on?
whatever it is you're tracking.
Okay. Give me an example or two.
Well, you're trying to get school, and so if we're trying to get more parents from the school to attend, and you might have a program of inviting them leaders from the church.
Okay. What about tracking care for people? I don't know, I got church business, systems, processes. Why track for processes, for reporting? Who has to do reports to the LCMS every year? How long does that take, you guys at your church? Yeah. Do you work with that at your church? Yeah? Okay.
Are you going from department to department to ask people?
And it was because last year was my first year and everything was so disorganized. So I was just going, I really had to go to every person I could think of.
Yeah.
And we'll try to organize it. Yeah.
Well, but the more you hyperbolate, if that's a verb, the more you pay. When you may or may, huh?
Hyperbole low.
Hyperbole low. There you go. That's true. Hyperbole could be a downward exaggeration. Yeah, goals. What about reporting, goals. What's my next slide? Did these align? Yeah, so where will you get your data? Where's this data coming from? What types of data now have you seen examples of?
This is a question I have for you, actually.
Okay.
Like, in order to get all this data, your people have to give it to you because, like, online we give it without thinking, right? Because we participate in everything we do online, and then the things that be take that information and put it into whatever, right?
Yep.
At church, it's all voluntary to get that data. And so, like check-ins, you have to get people to check in in order to actually have that data be accurate and useful. So, what are some ways to get this data and get your people to actually participate and give you the data you need?
When I help churches on the heels of a migration, so we've taken all the data that we had from all the random places, and we move it into a system. One of the first things I do is say is create opportunities for people to engage with it where you maybe otherwise didn't used to. So you could just show up on Tuesday morning for the ladies' Bible study, but now we want you to sign up for it. And that doesn't mean it can't be done in the lobby, in admin mode of a check-in or registration system. But that might be one example. And when you do register online, you make the name, address, phone number, email, required information, maybe for the first 6 months or so while you're onboarding into a system, rather than optional or hidden. Those are some of the ways. And then if you're going to have people register for something, to have them check in. And there's various options of checking in. I think one of the first things I say too, and I always reference the Home Depot self-checkout system. I mean, if anybody has touchscreen self-service and they kill it, Home Depot. Massive screens, easy to read, fast computers. And then the alternative is the old laptop you found in your church that is on Windows 98, and you're trying to run, your database on Explorer, or Firefox or whatever, right? Like, the experience that people have with it will, in times, influence whether or not they're willing to do it. Because if you can walk up and it's like, oh, there's a keypad. They must want my phone number. There are giant buttons, and it responds when I touch it. I think an act somewhere says, why do we make it difficult for people to engage with the gospel? Like, why do we make it difficult in our customer service situations, perhaps? Okay, so to keep on with your question, register for stuff that you maybe didn't used to have to register for which you didn't have to register. My mom is an English teacher, can't end sentences with prepositions. Here's a tip, though. If you do, you add the word comma like jerk at the end. So where are you going to, jerk? Or some other thing. Registration, check-in. As soon as people start their online giving, for example, and now the question may be, well, how do we get them to do that? Well, you have to talk about it. Are you a communications person? Yeah, okay, so there's a principle that you've heard before. It's talk the talk before you walk the walk. As a communications principle, you got to be talking about stuff 4 to 6 weeks in advance before you expect them to actually start walking it. So it's a strategy, not just a description. What else? Here's the other thing I say too, is if you're only giving people one avenue of interacting with your database, then you only have one avenue of interacting with your database. I said stuff twice. So if you're looking at giving and or registration of something, and or small group participation, and or check-in, then you start to be able to put together different pictures and filters of stuff where you're taking into account more than one factor, which you can't do if you're tracking stuff differently, because the stuff doesn't talk. Does that... I mean, I don't know if I necessarily gave you strategies to improve that. I say the phrase create check-in cultures. There are some systems, that may be part of what you're talking about. You can check somebody in without them knowing that you checked them in on some systems. Your leader on their phone can go click, 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 click real subtly during prayer time when everybody else's eyes are closed.
So,
don't do that.
I'll follow up on this then. In your migration experience, have you seen... I want you to make up a stat on the spot.
Oh yeah, 78% of whatever you're about to say.
Yeah, so how many churches that do the migration process get complete buy-in from the whole multi-generation church to start doing this? Or is there sort of okay, we're only get like 60% actually buy in until we create this culture that eventually the other 40% are just going to fade away?
Well, so... I mean, I think we exaggerate on the number of people who are elderly and more experienced in life that don't know how to interact with the computer. They have phones. They call their kids and their grandkids. We've learned to FaceTime. A bunch of people have Amazon or Walmart or Target ordering. Not true of everyone, but when it comes to our leadership in church, we switch to a fear-based sort of mentality and hyperbolize or whatever, and maybe might be an easy way out, or it might be because we don't want to change something. I mean, I've heard people say, yeah, but our old people won't do that. It's like, well, how do you know?
I'm actually not implying so.
Okay.
Just so you know.
The resistant adopter.
I've heard that so many times. Yeah. I assumed that's what you were saying.
How many people after worship, I'm actually working through the Church Center app and showing them how to use it,
Like
because they want to know.
Yeah.
Because they're in their 80s, but also 25 years old, they use this. So.
Yeah. tutorial videos, help desks, I don't know. Early adopters, goodwill ambassadors. I trained about 3 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago. I trained a room full of elders in leading, helping their pastor take next step strategies for 118 people who were 18 and older who were baptized and not confirmed. And they thought that might be low-hanging fruit in terms of a discipleship effort. And 15 guys in the room, downloading an app, going through the security thing. You're locked out for 5 minutes because they didn't know what they were doing. Like it is a real thing. But we persevered. And like they were fired up about it because now they knew who to call. And I told one of the things I say when you're working with workflows, and I'll get to these for a second, or actually database stuff in general, especially if you're in Planning Center. If you do your job, you'll love it. If you don't do your job, you're going to hate this because there are activity logs. 26 seconds ago, you finally reached out to that volunteer that was sitting there for 7 months. Bring your laptop to your staff meeting and ask your staff how they're doing with their particular step in the workflow. If you love your job, or if you do your job, you're going to love this. If you don't do your job, you're going to hate this. But imagine if there was actually effective buy-in, because maybe there's a little bit of accountability because you see that you're actually working together on stuff. So I'm going to keep moving on. Good questions. It's maybe we talk a little bit more afterwards or case by case sort of stuff. I've got. Huh?
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
A lot of it is the buy-in from the top and getting your team all on there, but then also like to just get data. One strategy too is like small group leaders. They're in small groups of people and they kind of
Sure.
down instead of looking at the entire whole.
That could be another way. Yeah.
What's the name of the program that does that?
Does what?
What you just said, tracks whether or not somebody contacted. Is it fun?
Planning Center people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think the other part is that you have to have people buy into the why. If people know why you're tracking it, then they're going to be more likely to do it. People don't know why do we take a test?
So why keep track? Someone's going to say, well, I don't want you. I don't want you to have my information out there in the cloud. It's like it's already out there. First of all. Secondly, some software actually has the same or higher encryption than some of the stores that you shop at. But when they start to see you treat them differently or care for them better, when you're in a shut-in. And every 45 days, let's say, you're reminded to go visit this next person, and you actually do it. And someone says, you never visit my mom. And it's like, gosh, I was there. I mean, that could be, so it's like, oh, okay. I'm not tracking your data to be creepy. In fact, in some systems, you can even control what information is shared down to, I want you to only see my first name. I don't even want you to know I'm married or have kids. Or you can see it all. Address, phone number, grade, pictures, the whole thing. So when you put data and their privacy in the hands of their people, that's a way to build some confidence as well in the thing. I'm going to keep moving on. Where will you get your... Oh, goals. I'm skipping a bunch of stuff. Goals. Why would you track data? Maybe so that you can set some, what is it, the smart goals are what? They're specific? Oh yeah? Okay. Huh? Wait, they're what? Measurable. Okay. Attainable? You know what, we talk about SMART goals all the time and then we rarely actually measure them. And then never actually know if we reach them or not. And then T is the what? What is T? Timely. Okay. So 100 baptisms in 2022. That might be one. I love this one. 50% of our members in small groups. I've heard 80% of our members in small groups. I'm like, good luck with that. Sorry. I mean, I don't mean to be super cynical, but like, especially if there's no actual engagement tracking plan and then the annual report comes out and you suddenly met your goals. Like, based on what, right? Like, I mean, I'm not trying to pick on our churches in general. What I'm trying to do is inspire curiosity and good critical thinking of high quality, high quantity, easily accessible data that you cross-reference and do something with. And you don't have to be a geek to do that. Okay? Goals. Other goals maybe. More people serving. More? How many more? More first-time givers. How many? When? What if you could actually track that? Give me a list of the first-time givers in the last 7 days so I can write a personal thank you note, and it tells me every Monday morning because there's a little bell, notification. Like, how cool could that be? More recurring givers. Let's see, if the purse is one of the last things to be converted, I'm going to leverage the fact that I remember to add a Martin Luther quote into my talk. Like, the first time you give it is one celebration. Maybe doing it again is a celebration. Do it regularly. Campaign leader type of a giver. More kids, more attendees. Let's see. Yeah, when you're tracking data, could be like the who, right? Demographics. First name, last name, age, where you live. There can be stuff like when you were baptized, when you were confirmed, when you served, when you last played acoustic guitar, when you last canceled on playing acoustic guitar. It keeps happening because there's a report that shows you that maybe you're not as reliable as you say you are. Fluke or pattern. These are curiosities that you get when you consider data. Yes or no. Data is binary. It's a bunch of ones and zeros. So you yes or no. It's your first time or your last time. You have or you haven't. You started or you stopped. Started or stopped what? Okay. So what are you going to do about it? Oh man, don't get me started on this. One of my former churches that will remain nameless, we tracked when people took communion, and I don't think we ever did anything with it. But we did it and spent staff time doing it. Look, we're part of a sacramental church, and that's not to downplay the importance of our sacraments that we believe bring grace, forgiveness of sins, the presence of God in our lives brings faith, grows faith. But if you're going to spend time tracking it, maybe do something with it. How long would a person have to go to raise concern in a pastor's mind? Pastors. How long? It's been 3 days, 6 months.
For what?
For not taking communion. A month.
It might depend how often you do communion.
Okay.
It might depend on what you know about that person.
Yeah. These are interrelated sort of things. But if you're going to track it and spend staff time on it and do nothing with it, one of the things I say, whatever you choose to maintain, you choose to maintain. So like the bigger your house gets and then you decide to move, the bigger truck you need to move it, and the more crap you keep moving from place to place. That you still don't wear that favorite t-shirt or play the vibrating football table game. I'm aging myself. Why'd you move that thing?
Because it might be worth something.
It might be worth something, but only if you play with it, for example. First, last, have, haven't, started, stopped. You have served, you haven't served. You started serving, you stopped serving. You attended for your first time. It's been 6 months since your last time. You're this and that. Like, you play acoustic guitar and you're 18. I don't know what you do with that necessarily, but it's stuff that you could consider doing. You're this and not that. You're baptized and not confirmed. You're registered, but you didn't show up. Again, it's ones and zeros. Depending on what database and stuff you work with, there's filters, lists, queries, mail merges, actual stuff that you can do with these things. Gosh, I say who is and who isn't, who did, who didn't. This won't tell you who will or you won't. Databases aren't fortune tellers. But they do help you analyze patterns. Maybe help you make good guesses. Which is back to that hunch thing. But not decisions, maybe as much as invitations or opportunities. The thing I like about so what now? The Great Commission. Always be closing is the way I like to say it. My wife says I should have been a sales guy, that I would have made a killing. She hasn't sold me on that though yet, because she's not a good salesperson. Always be closing. Does everybody know what I mean by that? Like when you're working a deal, when you're engaged in a conversation, have an outcome in mind and always be working on closing that deal. Always be closing means like you signed and sealed, you closed the deal. In church, we might have multiple deals that we're trying to close. So you have a baby that was born, and we're a sacramental church that values baptism. Always be closing with that family towards baptizing them. In our tradition, we typically move our children in faith development from that into confirmation, know those people, and always be closing. Out there in the sales world, they use Salesforce. You've maybe heard some of your parishioners perhaps talk about that, or in your previous careers, you use stuff like that. These are CRMs. That's another thing they call it. It's keeping track of people. Great Commission is always be closing. I believe there's evidence in the Bible of a workflow or a process queue if you're in CCB. Matthew 28:19. Teach all nations, step 1. Completed. Step 2, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right? Teaching them to obey, and maybe reminding them that God is always with us. Like a biblical example of a process queue. Kind of have an idea of where people are in this. Do something with it to move them to the next step because you're always closing. These are, so some systems call these, process queues. Planning Center calls them workflows. Has anybody used other variations of this in your databases? Have you even heard of this? Used one? Don't do this. Banana bread on the very first day that you showed up at a church. I lick the spoon at my house when I'm doing everything, cooking, baking. I will never eat the food that shows up on my doorstep from a stranger. Sorry, I just... Ugh. My cold sore is almost gone. I mean, so it's, yeah. Just kidding. Strike that, it's still there. It's... So let's say you got the name of someone who's a first-time guest at your church because maybe they filled out the friendship book if you pass that down. Or they scanned the QR code and it took you to a very short form where it asked for your name and your first name and your last name and either or your phone number or email because we want you to make the most of your Woodbury Lutheran Church experience. And so your name might automatically, in this case it actually does, would automatically appear. And now someone is assigned 15 people to make an initial welcome call or email. And when they complete that, check the box and it moves to the next person. Actually, in this case, this would be the same person who, based on a conversation they had, they might assign a follow-up phone call to another staff. So you have a great conversation, find out the guy's a guitar player, and so you send them over to the worship director in hopes of maybe getting them involved. That person makes their phone call. Then, and people may stay in some of these flows for months, weeks, days, years. Yes?
So we use Planning Center at our church, but I'm the pastor's wife, and so I don't have access to that. But when you...
What's your church? Let's go. I don't have access to your church.
Is there a place to keep notes on the phone call?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So there's continuity in the contract?
Yeah. And actually, and you can make the notes, in this case, you can make notes stick with the process, and then when they finish the process, the notes kind of, they stay there, or you can assign them directly to their profile, which might be helpful. In a case like this is walking through a what's intended to be a strategic pathway for assimilation for people. And look, people might skip a step or two, they might drop out. But I'll tell you what, if you don't even aim, you won't hit it.
And those are all steps that you can customize to what?
Oh, yeah. Totally. In this case, again, with this system, totally customizable. This could be the same person as this one, who's the same person as this one. They might be passed off to different people. You might skip multiple steps. Again, if you don't aim at something, you're not going to hit it. If you can't track it, you can't... Enforce is a hard word, but hold people accountable to it, their job, paychecks, benefits. Geez, like maybe, you chose to be in church work. What if you actually did church work?
It also gives people a template to follow if they don't really know how to lead.
Right. And what if there were notes when you click on this and it's a staff phone call? What do I do? Okay, I'm on staff. Oh, I'm supposed to make a phone call. And then maybe gave you a little bullet list of stuff to consider asking. And you know who talked to them last, and so you maybe find out what they found out about it if they didn't put it in the notes. I have so data-driven workflow, process-driven. Yes, ma'am.
Question. How do you, this is all data put in there and moved by different people and touched by different people. How do you balance the overly creepy to the church for the first time? There's baked goods on your doorstep the next week. Pastor on Tuesday.
Good question.
Wednesday. Like, how do you control the timeline of moving people through that? Because they're going to stop answering your phone calls if you are overbearing. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for
So
sure.
how do you
I may
guys
be the
at
exception.
church-
Who would eat baked goods that I made?
I would.
Thank you. Look, I want you to be considering what you do with your data. I am a huge Planning Center fan. I have a side hustle working with it because I believe in it that much. Okay? And everybody that I've talked to is grateful that they made the change. This particular system, and I'm pretty sure CCB does it as well. I have no experience with Fellowship One. I've worked personally with Shelby. Actually, that's not true. I worked at a church that had Shelby. I never touched it because I looked at it once and I was like, what? Home-baked goods. Snooze 7 days. Expected response time, 5. So it gets unsnoozed, and then it says, you should have this done in 5 days. As an active, full-time, part-time staff, paid person in church work, doing church work, and now it's, wait 7 days.
So you can control.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Super, yeah. Data-driven workflow, process-driven workflow, team-driven workflow, repeatable. I think sustainable.
Just real quick, how does that track a first served conversation? How does that track?
Well, so if you had a first served conversation, then you would say that you completed this step, and that first served conversation may be then including a survey that you send to them to fill out some of their interests that could save to their profile. Look, a lot of what I'm saying is based on experience that I've seen in other churches. When I'm setting up a new database for someone, and I'm looking at all the options in their drop-down menus, and I see that one of the areas of interest is pastor's breakfast. Like, you're interested in eating the pastor's breakfast? Because I'm curious when I see words and data and stuff like that. And no, I think that meant that they were interested in serving at the pastor's breakfast, let's say.
I have a
But wait, hold on one second. If you don't, well, no, go ahead. I'll remember where I'm at. Somebody, go ahead. No. I told you to interrupt me.
I am.
I did not mean it, but I.
And deficit people you're talking about, taking down the rabbit hole. But does this workflow, is that based in Planning Center?
And yes, and this is, yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted.
No, very good.
Pastor's breakfast.
Pastor's breakfast. Thank you. And then there was underwater basket weaving. There really wasn't, but I'm trying to make a hyperbole here for you to consider. When I set stuff up, I encourage people to start thinking in terms of people instead of tasks. So I enjoy working with, if we went back to that graph of ages, you make each of those an options. I enjoy working with 0 to 3-year-olds. I enjoy working with 4 to 11-year-olds. God bless all of you. I always say I love my kids. I would enjoy working in small group or young adult ministry. I enjoy working with seniors. So now you describe a person. And then another one I like to ask is, or have options. I like working outside, in the office, in the kitchen, on stage, in the tech booth, on an athletic field. And so if you're looking for people for a sports camp for the youth group, you look for people who check the box about working with 4 to 11-year-old or 12 to 18-year-olds who like working on athletic fields. Or you have to say athletic or sports camp director, sports camp volunteer, sports camp. And so you got to try to think of every possible option of thing you might ever need rather than describing attributes of a person. I don't know how we got on that. Oh, first serve conversation. So it might be that part of this, in your particular instance, includes a conversation and then a survey, and then you're notified when they complete the survey, so you know to badger them a couple more times if they didn't. Yeah. What's my next one? Accountable, yeah. If you do your job, you're going to love this. If you don't do your job, you're going to hate it. I always say, too, most people can do something great one time. Maybe it takes a little more effort to keep doing great things. So this repeatable, sustainable, accountable thing, I think is important, especially because church happens every 7 days, for example. If you're a part of a worship team, you might have small groups that happen once a month or something like that. What are some discipleship milestones? I probably skipped ahead on, we talked about this probably already a little bit. These are, baptism, confirmation, maybe small group attendance. If you can track this, you can move people along milestones. I'm starting to watch the time, so I want to have Q&A. Okay, I love this phrase here. If you can determine the pathway you have for people, if someone says, hey, what's my next step? And you're like, oh, gosh, I don't know. I mean, it might depend on where they are. They've never been to a Bible study, or they have, or whatever. But if you can kind of think through what are one of the pathways, or one of several pathways that people can take as they begin to become engaged, whether it's through small group. If I show up as a friend of someone who's in a small group, what might be a next step that person could be taken on or work through? I like to think of staff the path. If you can identify the path and then you can staff to that, like for example, the church with a lot of kids, they should probably think about staffing for that, and then who they hand off to. If you got a ton of kids, you might need to split junior high ministry from senior high ministry. Maybe not yet, but in a couple of years. Be curious about what you see with your data and work on it. And then I would just say work the process. And look, these are people that we're talking about. I'm not saying, gosh, there's some of us who could get into the automations and the list. And I'm going to make a list of all the 18-year-old acoustic guitar players whose wife went to the women's retreat and they gave at least $500 within the last 6 months. Wow! Like, what are you going to do with that? Don't get so caught up in data, but work the process. Workflows for assimilation, serving, discipleship, giving, care. These might be some things that are good for what? What was it? Sustainable, repeatable, accountable, church work type stuff. These are all pretty familiar terms to us, right? Small groups, baptisms, confirmations. You know what I mean by workflow for baptism, perhaps? Think about or identify newborn people or people who showed up who aren't baptized and figure out what to move them along. I'm really trying to hustle through here to allow time. Targeted communication. What's her name? Sophie. I love this. And in part because I've been a music director. Let me back up. A music director, and so while I've never led a choir, I've been in the same room as one a couple times. I will pull my editorial. But the phrase "preaching to the choir." That's not literally a pastor there saying, grace, mercy, and peace be to you from God. What they're saying is, you guys need to be more active. And it's like, we're here. Why are you telling me to be more active? I'm here every Wednesday night, and I sing every time I'm invited. You're preaching to the choir. That's what that means. Everybody knew that? What if you started talking to people where they're at? Speak to them differently. Y'all should come to the men's retreat. Because I sent a mass email that didn't filter out the women. So now I start to ignore you because I know you're not talking to me. So I unsubscribe because I get a lot of irrelevant information. Who's ever unsubscribed and asked for a reason? I'm getting too many. I'm not interested in your stuff. I think in church maybe, or even just like, you're not talking to me and I can tell. And you don't even know it. And that actually, because I can sometimes be judgmental, I'm like, man, what are you doing? You're full-time and you're broadcasting stuff that's irrelevant. Targeted communication. So if you know who has been baptized and who hasn't, you reach out to families with small children who have not been baptized, and you invite maybe only those people this time to attend a mass baptism Sunday. What if you baptize more than 2 people in a day and they didn't have to attend a 12-week class? Because we see it as the beginning of a faith journey. We say it every time we baptize someone. This is not the end, this is the beginning. We have godparents who are accountable, just in case someone dies even, to keep bringing you along. I read somewhere that 3,000 people were baptized on one day after a 12-week class. The Bible does not say that. But it happened, right, Mark? Wasn't there a 12-week class, maybe? Or, stop. No, don't.
It's only 3 hours a week.
I know. Wow, watch that first step. It's a doozy. Y'all should come. Targeted communication. One of the things I say is, as pastors and leaders and church workers and even communication in general, and to quote the most quoted TED Talk of all times, the Simon Sinek Golden Circle of why. Our brains, our minds, our hearts are wired to consider and to be motivated by the why. And yet, our announcements go all the way to what? It's the women's retreat. Sign up on this day and do this thing, and here's what we're going to do with it, and you don't even tell me why.
It'll be fun.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
So, if you can identify a specific audience, speak to them when they're at instead of preaching to the choir. And this isn't database as much as I just think this is good practice, best practices for communication. 80% why. That should be in your spoken verbal announcements. Again, not related to databases. I'm pretty passionate about this as a worship guy who has watched 7 minutes of worship service time disappear with rambling what and very little why at times. Verbal announcements, spoken announcements, your website, banner ads. Maybe your targeted communication that's focused with the why we believe a discipleship step is important for your families with small children who are unbaptized has a link to the baptism registration page so you can tell them if they're interested in more information. Gosh, what if you could text people, for another situation, or have a push notification even? So what are you currently using for your church member databases, mass emails, signups and registrations, worship planning, donations, attendance, kids, security, name tags, master event, building? I feel sorry if someone's doing a stenographer on this one. Baptism event, building, scheduling, calendar, home group management. Trying to wrap up and just kind of spark conversation. What else? Goal, more effective and consistent engagement with people because of high quality data. This is about your people and how to more effectively engage with them. One other example in this, I'm not even going to hide it. Planning Center, given an email, will search automatically to your Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram pages, which you could go to anyway, so don't get creeped out by that. So before you call on them because they've been missing and your data shows that they have, maybe ask about their anniversary trip in Mexico. Because they posted a crap ton of pictures about it, and you didn't even bother to ask them how it went. Is crap ton a bad word? All right, I'm a Planning Center fan. All the information within that is integrated. These are the examples that I've been giving, and I'll say this: the more it's used, the more powerful it becomes. What do I have here? Q&A. There we go. Can I sit down? In this comfy chair. Q&A. I welcome Q&A, and if there's none, then we can just end this and go get coffee. Anybody, anything about any of this stuff?
I was a pastor. 2 churches later now.
If you can export it into a spreadsheet, you can import it into a database. And that's true of all platforms.
Yeah. I've migrated from fellowship 1 to 2. I will say, migrating from other places, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the hardest stuff to migrate is the giving data, depending on how granular you want to get with that.
Depends on which systems you're importing to. There's a guy named Evan Gernst, I think is his name. And in the case of Planning Center, he's the one guy who has a platform that allows you to migrate donation history. I've chatted with him a couple of times. Great guy. He's landed on a couple of really great ideas. Importing notes from people, importing giving history. I'm in the process on the side of moving 60,000 donations over a 10-year history for a church because they want to see that sort of long view on things. So it is actually very possible into Planning Center. I'm sure it is with other people. Yeah. There's some stuff like if you want to move everyone's attendance to something that they've been to before, I would say, do you need to know that 7 years ago they did that one thing with that one guy with that one time at that one place? Or might there maybe be something like, when's the last time you attended something? Right? Because if you did something 27 times, that might show a pattern, but that's really tough to move into just about any system. But you can move maybe the last time they did something. So when you set your filter of every 6 weeks, if you're not in church, because Barna says that's become the average regular attender. We love to say that when we talk about and excuse why our attendance is low, but then we do nothing with it to measure it and keep track of it. I don't even know if that was a question or an answer. You rambled on for 6 minutes. Go, next.
I don't even know if you'll know the answer to this, but we use
Jesus.
Thank you.
We use ClearStream that, integrates with Planning Center.
Okay.
Does Planning Center ever get to the point where people can return text messages?
Directly into people?
Well,
They might eventually. ClearStream, Pastor's Line, text and church can actually feed directly into workflows and automations with that. You can chat back and forth with people through some of those.
We send text through Planning Center, but they just
Yeah. I don't know what sort of response time people get from other platforms. I have seen response time from tickets in 4 minutes or less with systems like Planning Center. That'll tell you how long it'll take for them to get back to you. It's very responsive, very responsive. What I do anytime I come up with an idea, I did not wear my Planning Center socks today. They send me swag because I give a lot of ideas. One time I heard that they wanted to send me on vacation, so I would stop sending ideas to them. And then I said, I don't have to. And they were like, no, we were kidding. We love... Anyway. So the top right corner, if you're a Planning Center user, the top right corner has a question mark. I do all caps when I submit a ticket, feature request, and then I just describe why I think it's important. And I always start with, wouldn't it be cool if? Because they're like, yeah, it would be. Because I'm always closing. Because if I get someone nodding their head, they already agree with me. We shouldn't be able to text people, should we? Are you trying to sell a car? Okay. All right, other Q&A. Or we can stop. Your choice. I migrate and I train. And if you want to email me, it's joel@aboutyourpeople.com. I care more about you being curious about the stuff you already have than whether or not you call me, and I mean it, okay? Because I've worked in places where we don't, and I think it's a crying shame. I work at a place that uses a system that I never touch. And they're tired of me evangelizing about it. I've been told to zip it. And yet I sit in meetings where we make excuses for it all the time. You want to? Yeah. Anyway, all right. Thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it very much.